Bursty here with a new episode of Chordplay. This is part 2 of the Chords of Extreme, and it was about 3 years ago when I created the first episode, surrounding these guys. And I've also released 3 episodes of 3 for All surrounding Nuno Bettencourt, also a Breaking Chords for Nuno. Definitely, I'm a huge fan. I've been an Extreme fan since I was a teenager in high school. And these guys started to erupt in the late 80s and just exploded in the early 90s, which was literally right before the whole grunge alternative explosion. So they really just had a few years to really kind of make their impact on the scene, even though they technically formed in 1985 in Boston. But it wasn't until that first Extreme album kind of hit, Mother Don't Want to Go to School Today, and Kid Ego and some of those songs, Play With Me, of course, was in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. But then their second album, Porno Graffiti, just erupted. More Than Words, Wholehearted. There's a ton of great music on there. He-Man Woman Hater, When I'm President, Little Jack Horny. That's a great album. And then Extreme 3, 3 Sides to Every Story, that's also a great album. Cupid's Dead's on there. What Peacemaker Die, Warheads. There's some great music on that album too. And they've continued. They've released 5 studio albums. They have a couple live albums and compilations. And they're getting ready to release their 6th album, 6. And they just released their single Rise a few days ago, and it just exploded on the internet, which I was happy to see that. Nuno's just tearing it up during that solo. But anyway, I'm excited, definitely looking forward to their new album, and we're going to dive deeper into their chords and rhythm work. So here we go. So definitely Nuno Bettencourt opened some doors for me as a musician and a guitarist, because I was already obsessed with Van Halen and Satriani and Steve Vai and Malmsteen and some of these players, Paul Gilbert. But then as soon as I noticed Nuno, he was doing different things with all these different techniques and ideas I'd learned from other players, tapping ideas, string skipping, just shredding and doing all sorts of stuff, octave tapping and mirror tapping and stuff. So he was, throwing out all these really different ideas, but they were related or somewhat similar to some other stuff that I've learned, from Van Halen and some of those other players. And definitely, Nuno just knocks my socks off. When I hear him play, the intensity, and he could just be playing rhythm, but it's intense, and then of course when he takes a solo, he just tears your face off. But, a dynamite, great guitarist, a legendary, 80s rock guitarist. So I've always found it interesting when a band has an association or connection with another band, and obviously Extreme has a Van Halen connection. Nuno's obviously inspired and influenced by Eddie Van Halen. And also Gary Cherone, literally sang with Van Halen on Van Halen 3 in that tour. But, one connection that some players out there may have forgotten is their Queen connection with Brian May. And Brian May is obviously a huge Extreme fan. He's given them props in interviews and mentioned them in interviews and stuff for years and decades. But when I hear Extreme, I definitely hear Van Halen, a little bit of Zeppelin, a little bit of Aerosmith, and of course Queen mixed in there too, the rock and stuff and vocal harmonies and everything. But here's a quote from Brian May referring to Extreme. So the music and chord-based ideas in this lesson came from 3 different Extreme albums, and it's the first 3 albums they released. And there's some great music to be found all over those albums. Actually, on every Extreme album, there's great music. But there's something, kind of near and dear to those first 3 albums, because I was cutting my teeth, and it reminds me of my teenage years, and wrapping up high school, going to college or whatever, and Extreme was a part of that all the way through. The intro, that's the song Little Girls from the first Extreme album, and we are tuned down a half step, and it's something like this. Something like that. So we're in the key of G, and it's this really rowdy and raunchy, rock guitar riff. Big slide in the beginning there, and then all these little partial chords. So it's it's, you know, like a partial G, partial B flat, and then you're grabbing that, you know, that D, F, and then the open G string. So that's like a D minor 11 implied, or a D minor add 11, and then that partial F to partial G. So think of like Smoke on the Water type, you know, type of riff, but it's moving around a little bit more active, obviously, than that Deep Purple classic. But like that. And do that first riff again. And then right there after that D minor add 11, you're going to do a D power chord to a C. And there's a harmonica just blasting and jamming through all this. So it's kind of hard to make out what he does next because that harmonica is just rocking out. But there's a fill right there. And I came up with something like this. Because whatever it is, it falls right directly in time. So that's tricky. You're doing... So it's kind of like half fretted, half open string. Time right here. So you're doing this. Come down like G minor blues. Like that. And then F sharp to G. Little Girls kicks ass. That's a great riff. Next up's the song Kid Ego, and this is also from the first Extreme album. I think this was their first single, but something like this. So it starts with this big, you know, A power chord, and then an E riff right here, like E blues. Come down right there, and end up on that E power chord down there. Do that riff again, and then a G power chord to a D power chord, and then do that first riff again. And right there you're going to do kind of a squeal on that E, and then you're doing that rolling rhythmic kind of descending thing. So it's really interesting the way that turns around and kind of lands on the, you know, the downbeat again. And you just go right back to that riff again. The last time right there, finish that riff, and then really interesting there. The verse starts right there, but Kid Ego kicks ass. That's a great song. Speaking of kicking ass, this is Susie Wants Her All Day What from Porno Graffiti, which is right there on the wall, and this is the chorus section, which totally kicks ass, like this. So it starts with this aggressive, you know, E riff, and I love these little twisted kind of partial chords and stuff that Nuno's throwing in right there, because he's doing this. So it's E. Then you see that kind of movement there on the A string, and he's grabbing that F sharp and then back to that E and then D sharp. So there's actually 3 implied chords right there. There's E5. And that's basically like part of B right there, B5. And then move down to that D sharp, and that's part of B major right there. Right? But you just keep doing that low E D open. You're kind of moving back and forth between that E and that B over D sharp. And then do the exact same thing up here in G. So there's G5. It's like G5 over E. And then you're going to add this A note. So that's like part of D5 right there. And then move down and grab that F sharp, and that's part of D major right there. Next up's the intro from Watching Waiting from the first Extreme album, and there's some interesting things happening here once again, like this. Power chord. Right there it's A over C sharp, just add that C sharp on the 4th fret there on the A string. A D sus2 right there. To a G5 right there. So do that G5 and then you're coming down E, D, C sharp to B right there with that single note riff. And then back to A right there. You're kind of palm muting and picking your way through it. And then that A over C sharp, palm mute and pick your way through that. And then this D major 7 sus2 to D major. You hear a pinch harmonic right there on the 2nd fret. And then do all that again, the A. Song, and there's a great guitar solo hiding in that one too. Next up's the pre-chorus and chorus from Cupids Dead from 3 Sides to Every Story, and I did feature the intro for the song and kind of the intro verse in part 1 of the Extreme Chordplay episode. Now we're going to dive a little bit deeper, but this part. Right there, with that C9 to a B9, and then it's E7 sus4 to E7 right there. So some chord changes, big time. C9, D9, E7 sus4 to E7, and then it's G7 over D just for a second. Let that ring. Do that C9 again. And then just start banging on the B7 sharp 9 right there. And then you hear the single note riff. That riff that I showed in part 1 3 years ago. Last but not least is the song Warheads, and this is the opening track from the album 3 Sides to Every Story. And it kind of reminds me a little bit when it kicks in, it kind of reminds me of Hang 'em High from Van Halen, just a little bit. But Warheads kicks ass, something like this. interesting. And we're doing this kind of lazy, kind of sneak peek of the main riff in the intro. So he's doing something like that. So you're sliding F sharp into G and then the open G string. And then C sharp into D with the open D string. And then kind of a slight squeal on that G. And then a huge E minor 11 right there. E minor 11, that's a massive chord. You know, really tasty. Definitely Nuno's no, chord slouch. He throws in cool chords everywhere in their songs. You're gonna answer that with the next riff, which is right here. Really overpicked and aggressive. He's digging in big time right there. But what, F sharp to G to the open D, and then G sharp to A to the open D. Back to that E minor 11 at the end. And then it turns into Hang 'em High, kind of. It's different, but it's like this, real slow. Really aggressive. So he's just flying through that riff. Super aggressive, palm muted, real tight. Killer song, and I love riffs like that where it keeps you on your toes, or I guess your fingertips. But definitely, the Van Halen influence is right there. You can hear it. All right, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with part 2 of the Chords of Extreme. And definitely, Nuno's been a huge influence on me. It started back when I was a teenager, and it continues to this day. And I'm stoked and so excited to hear their new album. And if the rest of the songs sound anything like Rise, Extreme's album 6 is probably going to whip your ass. It sounds like it's going to be a great one. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to my lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content material. Thank you.